Welcome to The Nameless. This story is not for everyone, but if you're still here, take a deep breath. Let's begin.
His car was found with the engine still running. That was the first thing the sheriff told me when he called. He said it calmly, like it was just a detail, but it stuck in my head in this heavy, suffocating way. The headlights were still on, too, shining at nothing in the middle of a dirt road outside an abandoned mining town. My brother, Luke, was nowhere. His phone was in the cup holder, the driver's door was open, but there wasn't a single footprint around the car besides his own leading toward the town, and none leading back. I remember standing in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear, staring at the fridge like I was trying to read something on it. The sheriff kept talking, but all I could focus on was that one sentence. His car was found with the engine still running, like he had just stepped out for a second and never came back, like something waited until he was out of sight. Back then, nothing about our lives seemed strange. Luke and I didn't even talk every day. He was 4 years older and always chasing something. Old photography spots, small towns, forgotten buildings. He'd drive hours into the desert for a picture of a boarded-up gas station. He'd always been like that as a kid, too, wandering off, exploring, dragging me along until I was old enough to say no. He lived about 2 hours from me, close enough that we saw each other for holidays. We'd been talking more lately, though. He'd gotten into researching ghost towns. It started harmless. Videos, articles. Then he began visiting them. He said he liked the quiet, said they felt paused, like time stepped out for lunch and never came back. He wasn't reckless, just curious. So when he called me a few days before he disappeared, I didn't think much of it. He was excited about a small mining settlement out in the hills called Stillharrow. I'd never heard of it, and I travel for work. He said it didn't show up on maps anymore, just on old survey documents. A couple buildings left, a church, a pump house, that was about it. He joked that he might find some old coins or tools. I told him to bring a mask because of dust. I didn't think that would be the last normal conversation we'd ever have. After the sheriff's call, I drove out there myself. The sky was washed out blue. The heat made the horizon wobble. They'd towed Luke's car already, but I saw the spot where it had been. 2 tire tracks and a shape in the dirt where the engine heat had baked the ground. Beyond that was Stillharrow. You could see it from the ridge, a cluster of leaning buildings, all gray and sun-bleached. No signs of life, no movement, not even birds. Just the sound of wind brushing through empty door frames. Standing there felt like stepping into a paused movie. Even the air seemed held back. I followed the path toward the town. The sheriff had said Luke's footprints were clear, so I expected to see them. But the wind had erased everything by the time I arrived. The silence made me nervous. The kind of silence that feels like it has weight, like it's listening. I walked into the center of Stillharrow. There was a main street, if you could call it that, a wide dirt lane between a general store and what used to be a boarding house. The windows were dark squares. The doors hung crooked. Everything looked like it would collapse if you exhaled too hard. I kept calling Luke's name, even though I knew it wouldn't help. My voice just felt swallowed, no echo, like the town didn't want sound bouncing around. I checked the store first. Inside, the wooden floor was warped from age. Shelves still clung to the walls, empty except for a few old tins that had rusted into place. But there was something strange. On the countertop was a clean circle, perfectly dustless, as if something round had been sitting there recently. Everything else was layered in years of grime, but that one spot looked untouched. I wish I hadn't leaned down to get a closer look. When I stood back up, the front door, which I'd left halfway open, was now completely open, as if someone had pushed it. I told myself it was the wind, even though there hadn't been any breeze when I walked in. That was the first moment I felt watched. The sheriff said Luke's prints led through the center of town toward the old church, so that's where I headed next. The church sat at the far edge, tilted slightly, the steeple broken off. Its door was closed. Unlike the other buildings, this one seemed almost maintained. No graffiti, no broken boards, just old. I don't know why, but I knocked before opening the door. No answer. I pushed it gently. It swung inward with a soft creak. The air inside was cooler. Dust floated in thin shafts of light coming through cracks in the roof. The pews were still lined up, though some had collapsed. And at the very front, where a pulpit would normally be, there was a small wooden table. On it sat a lantern, modern, battery-powered. One I recognized. Luke used one like it for night photography. I walked up and picked it up. It was warm. That's when I felt the floor shift slightly under my foot. Not like it was breaking, more like something moved beneath it. I froze. The air seemed to tighten. I stepped back slowly. I didn't see anything, but I got the overwhelming sense that someone had been standing exactly where I was just a second ago, watching, waiting for me to move. I left the lantern and backed away until I was outside again. The next morning, something was different. I'd slept in my car on the ridge nearby, too exhausted to drive home. When I woke, Still Harrow looked wrong. Not different in any obvious way, but the shadows of the buildings felt off. Too long. Like the sun wasn't hitting them the same way. Or maybe the structures had shifted slightly in the night. It made my stomach twist. I went back anyway. Down the main street, I noticed new footprints. Not old ones, not mine. They were faint, but definitely there, leading between buildings. I followed them until they reached the entrance of the boarding house. Inside, the air smelled faintly like pine, which made no sense. Nothing in that place was alive. The stairs were rotting, but they held my weight when I went up. The hallway on the second floor was lined with open rooms. Most were empty except for debris. But one wasn't. In the last room on the right, someone had spread a blanket out on the floor. Clean, modern, dark blue. Next to it was a metal cup filled with water. And on the wall above it, someone had drawn a circle in the dust with their finger. Just a simple circle, but deep. You could see the wood grain beneath. My heart started pounding. Luke carried a blanket like that in the back of his car. I said his name, quietly at first, then louder. I didn't expect an answer, but I got one. 3 soft taps from somewhere deeper in the building. I wish I hadn't gone to check. I walked back down the hallway. The taps came again, this time from behind a half-open door near the stairs. I pushed it wider with my foot. The room was empty except for an old wardrobe that leaned against the wall. Tap, tap, tap. Not from inside the wardrobe, from behind it. I grabbed the edge and pulled it forward enough to look. Behind it was a narrow doorway leading into an unfinished crawl space. The air was cool and smelled like dirt. I crouched and shined my phone light inside. Something shifted in the darkness. Slow, deliberate. My throat tightened. My voice cracked. The shifting stopped. Silence. Then the smallest sound, a breath, or something almost like one, came from farther back. I leaned in closer without meaning to. That's when someone whispered my name. Not loud, not aggressive. Just a soft, familiar, "Hey," in Luke's voice. The same tone he used when calling me to check something out. But it wasn't coming from one place. It echoed strangely, like it was being repeated by several mouths in different corners of the crawl space, all whispering my name in the same cadence. I pulled back so fast I hit my shoulder on the doorway. I stumbled into the hall and didn't realize I was shaking until my phone light jittered across the walls. I ran out of that building and didn't look back. I called the sheriff again, told him I'd found signs someone had been staying in the boarding house. He said he'd send someone later, but he sounded tired, like he'd already given up hope. I didn't blame him. People went missing out there sometimes. Most were never found. Before leaving Still Harrow, I forced myself to check one last place, the pump house. Luke had mentioned it on the phone. He said old towns always had one, usually built sturdier than everything else. The pump house was a small structure near a dry well. Inside, the air was cold. Not cooler than outside, cold. I saw my breath when I stepped in. There were markings on the dirt floor, circles, overlapping. Some were faint, some fresh. At the center lay a small wooden object, a toy horse. I recognized it instantly. Luke had carried it in his camera bag as a good luck charm, a childhood keepsake. But the horse wasn't where he would have left it. It was placed upright, perfectly balanced. I stared at it for a long time. My chest felt tight. The silence in that room pressed on me like a hand on the back of my neck. Then the door creaked behind me. Not from wind, from pressure, from someone pushing it. I turned slowly. The doorway was dark now, darker than it should have been, like a shadow was standing there, blocking the light. But there was no shape, just a sense, a presence. I stepped backward. My heel erased part of one of the circles in the dirt, and the temperature dropped even further, like the room was inhaling. I grabbed the toy horse and backed toward the wall. I didn't know what else to do. I whispered, "Luke, if you're here, please." A sound answered. Not a word, not anything human, just a low, rhythmic hum from outside, like several people chanting quietly from a distance. It grew slightly louder, then stopped all at once. I ran out of that town without looking back. That was 2 months ago. Search teams combed the area for 2 weeks. They found the lantern. They found the blanket. They didn't find the circles in the pump house. A windstorm erased them before anyone else saw. They didn't find the toy horse either. I didn't tell them I had it until later. I gave it to the sheriff. He examined it and said it was old, but not that old. He said it looked like something placed there intentionally. I asked him if he believed in people living out there, hidden groups, strange gatherings. He didn't answer. Even now, I don't know what that thing was in the crawl space, or what whispered my name in my brother's voice. Sometimes I still hear it when the house is quiet. Just the faintest echo of that soft "hey" drifting out from a dark room. The sheriff told me they officially closed Luke's case last week. No evidence of foul play. No signs he left the area on foot. No remains. Missing. That word doesn't feel right, though. Missing sounds temporary. Missing sounds like he could walk through my door any minute, dusty and annoyed that everyone made such a big deal out of this. But he won't. And I can't stop thinking about the lantern left warm in the church, the blanket neatly placed on the floor, the footprints that appeared overnight, the circles in the pump house, all signs that someone, or several someones, were still there when I walked through that ghost town. Still watching, still waiting. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I imagine walking back into Still Harrow after dark. I imagine the windows glowing faintly. I imagine hearing Luke's voice calling me from one of the buildings. And I imagine following it. I won't, but the thought lingers. The last thing I remember from that place was the feeling that the town wasn't abandoned at all. It was inhabited, just not in a way I could understand. And every night since, I've had the same dream. I'm standing on the ridge above Still Harrow. His car is still down there with the engine running. The headlights are shining into the empty main street. And in the glow of those lights, I see figures standing in the doorways of the buildings. Dozens of them, all perfectly still, all facing me. And one of them is holding a small wooden toy horse.